Hi everyone, Ian Gregg here again. This is a quick look at the message that comes from the Bible readings for November the 7th, according to the Revised Common Lectionary, which is used by a cross-section of churches and chapels. And this week we have the happy ending of the story of Ruth and Naomi in Ruth 3 and 4. Jesus comparing the sincerity of a poor widow making her offering with the haughty but unspiritual behaviour of the scribes in their tasselled robes in Mark 12. And then a look at worship on earth and how it is at best a poor imitation of the sanctuary of heaven where Jesus now exercises his high priesthood. That's in Hebrews. The theme that emerges is that God doesn't fall for our human pretenses. He really prefers reality and honesty, even when it doesn't show us in a good light or when we are angry at him because of the difficulty we are experiencing. The story of Ruth teaches us two fundamental lessons. Firstly, about trusting God because he is the faithful one and because he is good. And secondly, looking for God's provision at every turn. In this story, it is the provision of a kinsman redeemer in the form of a marriage partner for the young widow Ruth, who is a Moabite, and a kinsman redeemer for her mother-in-law Naomi also. They have been out in the fields belonging to Boaz where the men have been harvesting, and all the men are sleeping in the barn guarding the grain. Naomi tells Ruth to lie at Boaz's feet, a sign that she is open to marriage. And that is how the story ends. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Naomi and Ruth, widowed in pagan Moab, have decided to trust the living God and step out in faith in returning to Naomi's homeland. Their courage was richly rewarded. But this week there is a second Old Testament story that sits alongside it. And this story is about Jonah, who, unlike Naomi and Ruth, was really rather privileged with a prophetic anointing and a commission to go to a place where the Lord was preparing a great work. But rather than trusting God, Jonah initially tried to run away from him. The Lord rescued him miraculously and set him off towards Nineveh, where he should have gone the first time, and reminded him of his divine call. It was a big test of trust. Imagine receiving a word from God to take your biggest Bible and go and preach salvation in Jesus through the streets of, say, Tehran or Kabul. So we need to read that Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went against the backdrop of a notoriously wicked destination. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. "Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you." Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. And Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. The Ninevites believed God, and all of them put on sackcloth. When God saw how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Jonah had started by being very unreal with God, not telling God his fears and misgivings, but running away. Independence from God is a fair baseline definition of sin, and Jonah seemed to show plenty of that independence. But God was gracious and rescued him and gave him a second chance. And that's a little parable of salvation all on its own. God's grace in making undeserved provision for our lives, and the part we play in receiving it through honest and open relationship with God, was not how most of the scribes of Jesus' day saw their role. They saw themselves as guardians of the law and custodians of righteous living, and they had appearances to keep up. And they were good at that part. Jesus contrasts the scribes, distinctive in the temple courts by their dress and bearing, with an insignificant-looking widow woman who had little to live on but still offered her 2 small coins to God, trusting in his provision for her. As he taught, Jesus said, "Watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and make lengthy prayers." They're acting out in a show of religious piety that disguised hard hearts would bring them severe punishment at the end time, Jesus said. And in church today, there is the danger of loving the position and loving the formalities of many words and actions too much, instead of humbly seeking the rebirth and spiritual awakening that comes to us through trusting Jesus. Earthly orders of worship, especially the elaborate and wordy ones, are just man-made constructions that imitate some aspect of heavenly worship, whereas knowing God through trusting Jesus changes the focus and the priorities, because his victory on the cross made the priest and sacrifice system of the old covenant obsolete. Nor did he enter heaven to offer himself again and again, the way the high priest enters the most holy place every year with blood that is not his own. Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. As we are seeing in this week's readings, our Father is all about love and relationship, and he seeks those who will relate to him honestly and openly. That is, both in acknowledging the many ways in which we fall short, but at the same time responding to his love and grace which we can know through Jesus. What is real is that through Jesus, believers all have access into the heavenlies to know the risen Jesus who presides there, who makes intercession for us to the Father. Better still, we all have the capacity, and indeed we have the commission, to journey with others and help them to come into that new and real relationship for themselves. Well, thank you so much for listening. I look forward to being with you the same time next week, and until then, may God bless you richly.